My guest today is Diane Goyette, a child development specialist, educator, and advocate with over 30 years of experience in early childhood education. Diane has worked extensively with children, educators, and families to support emotional development and address behavioral challenges. Her passion for this work is deeply personal as well. Diane is parent to Corinne, who has autism and ADHD, an experience that has shaped her perspective and deepened her commitment. She is the creator of the 4 C's of emotional support, a practical framework that helps caregivers meet children's emotional needs with compassion and clarity. Without further ado, let's hear Diane's story, what sparked her purpose, the challenges she faced, and the quiet strength that has carried her throughout it all. Hi, Diane. A very warm welcome to Atlanta Diaries. I think quiet strength is the correct word because you and I have lived in the same neighborhood for 5 years. But if it wasn't for Denise in our lives, I would have never come to know the amazing Atlanta that you are.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted and honored to be on your podcast.
So, what was your early childhood like, and what really drew you to early childhood education?
Well, I actually was interested in early childhood education since I was in early childhood. When I was 7, the first of my younger brothers came along, and I think it was inspired primarily by my mother's care. And so as soon as that younger brother could sit up, I propped him in his diapers in front of a chalkboard and was trying to teach him things. And by the time I was 10, my second younger brother came along, and then I had a class to teach. And so that's how I played part of the time until I was old enough to babysit. So that interest started really early. I'm not sure exactly why, but I was absolutely not to be deterred from it, even though I had lots and lots of encouragement to do just that.
So, it looks like there were people sort of cheerleading you in this journey.
Yes, I guess in my world, I was just immersed in a very traditional gender role family where, the dad did the manly things, if you will, the works on the house and the cars and mows the lawn and takes out the garbage. And mom did, all the housekeeping and the childcare and the cooking and the cleaning and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And even in college, my friends and I have joked about this that, going toward the journey of are we going to go to college or not, the high school guidance counselors, they were called at the time, they just didn't encourage us to explore very much. And of course, in the days before the internet, it was kind of a challenge to try to explore to see what else was out there. But I also knew that I wanted to be committed to motherhood. And I wanted to be able to wholeheartedly do whatever job and career that I wanted to do. And I didn't think that I could do both of those things, just knowing my own personality and the way that I would immerse myself in it. And, that was it.
And therefore, what was the perspective on financial independence?
Oh, I think back in my day, in the dinosaur age, um, there was always the expectation that the male was going to be the primary breadwinner.
Hmm.
And that even though I was encouraged to go to college, to decide on some kind of career or profession that brought me fulfillment, it wasn't so much the financial independence part of that goal, hence early childhood education, which is not a lucrative field to say the least. But there was always the fallback that it was assumed I would get married and my husband would be the one who was going to really take on the bulk of the financial responsibility for the family. And for me, it was the meaning of the work and feeling like I could make an impact in the world, make it a little bit of a better place through my work that was always important to me. And I was fortunate that way
Sure.
because of just how it worked out.
So let's, shift gears a bit, Diane. What was it like being a mom to a child with special needs and navigating your own career in education?
So it was really challenging. And when I had my daughter, and from toddlerhood, things were just always a little different. Well, even from birth, because she was a premature baby and spent 3 weeks in the NICU. So later I realized that was an early traumatic kind of experience that did impact her development as she grew. But it was actually her early childhood teachers that pointed me towards, oh, you might get her evaluated for occupational therapy because she's having difficulty with motor development that we can see is different from her peers. I had never even heard of occupational therapy, which we shorten to OT. And that is a service that many children with special needs, and also, though, lots of typically developing children might need for a short period of time to address some kind of developmental delay of some sort. So as the years went on, I kept thinking, I thought I knew about children and I thought I knew what I was doing, and I felt comfortable in my classroom of young children or kindergartners or whatever. And then I had this kid, and I thought, either those courses I took and the books were maybe not all spot on, or there's something really different about my kid. And it turned out to be the latter. And you know what? That's really hard for parents to accept. I think I was more willing than my husband to accept that because, nobody wants to think there's something wrong with your child. And fortunately, now we are understanding that even if you have a diagnosis such as ADHD or bipolar disorder, which is one of hers, or anxiety or autism, that those things all exist on a continuum. This is all part of the natural human variability in characteristics. It's not necessarily that something is wrong with your kid, but in the way that we had been looking at your quote average children, we weren't recognizing the strengths or the challenges of certain children who fit just outside of that typical set of parameters. And so that was a little tough. And then in terms of navigating my career at the same time, I guess I always kind of looked at it in terms of, again, I wanted meaningful work in my life and it brought me great joy to be doing it. But I also realized that I only have so much stamina. I'm not one of those go-getters who, manages on 4 hours of sleep and go, 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 and does all these different things. And so there were many times that I would take a step back and focus on Corinne's needs when she needed me the most. And especially that would be like around times when we would move due to my husband's career, which any family may find is to be challenging. But when you have a child with mental health special needs, it can be really, I don't want to say devastating, but it can really trigger a lot of difficulties that you need to address.
Absolutely. And would you remember the time when you actually realized that she experiences the world differently?
Well, I tend to think of myself as a slow learner and that sometimes it takes a while before something dawns on me. And even in Corinne's earliest years, like as a toddler, there was the motor delays, there was a sensory processing difficulties where it turns out one of her biggest challenges is that she's very hypersensitive to everything that comes in from her senses. And it took us years to really get a grasp on that and how much that was affecting her on a day-to-day basis. Imagine your most uncomfortable experience. For some people, it's a crowded restaurant that's very noisy, or the big long line at the airport. I mean, just some kind of experience that you just feel uncomfortable in many different ways. And then imagine if your child is feeling that level of discomfort coming at them from all their senses, and it's 24/7 and it never goes away. And it really took me a very long time to figure that out, which kind of makes me sad right now. But I think what that did was give me, I think I'm already kind of a warm, nurturing, compassionate kind of person. I gave me even more sense of compassion for an awareness of what other people might be experiencing. I don't assume anymore that everyone experiences the world the way that I do. because her way was very different.
Yeah. And what were those early years like then for both of you? You're sort of labeling it as compassion today, but at that time, as a young mom who only understands neurotypical kids, it must have been so hard.
Oh, absolutely. And Corinne, understands this a bit now as well, where I struggled. Again, I had that self-doubt as a parent. Oh, maybe I'm not a good parent. And because every day seems like a challenge. What she was struggling with was severe, what you call dysregulation, moodiness, mood swings, ups and downs. And as a young child, not knowing how to handle that. So instead of a typical a little tantrum where, toddlers do things that are completely irrational. They fall apart because you gave them the blue cup instead of the red cup, and they act like it's the biggest problem on earth. So we had those kinds of experiences, only they were bigger and they
Hmm.
lasted longer
Hmm.
in terms of each episode and through the years. So you know that something's different with your child when they are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they are still having these rages where they just can't hold it together. And that's very painful for both of you to experience because you both want it to end. Basically, I just wanted it to go away, right? I could see that she was in pain and, I'm trying to support her and she'd, go to talk therapy and occupational and speech and all these different support things. And eventually she got into special ed at school and we tried to do everything we could to help her be as successful as she could. But I could see that she was in pain. Nobody wants to have those kinds of experiences every day.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted her pain to go away. And so I have to say that I felt, I don't want to use the word resentful. I didn't resent my daughter. I resented the struggles that she had to go through.
Hmm.
And through all this, I had a very strong, and still do have a very strong faith. And so I would pray a lot. I used to pray, please just, take this cup from me, just heal her brain, just help her feel better, just, you know, make her a regular kid and all that. And the breakthrough came when I realized I was asking for the wrong thing. And instead of asking for rescue me from this, I needed to pray for help me to accept
Hmm.
what's happening and make the best of it. And honestly, that's when I think things changed and got better. Our relationship got better, things got better for her. Um, but unfortunately, by that time, she's in college. And so, there's this part of me that how I wish I could go back and do things over again. But that's why I'm very committed to share this emotional support with other adults that deal with children, especially children who have challenges. Those kids really are not there to make our lives miserable. Sometimes we can go, why me? And why can't I have that kid down the street? That's beside the point. It's
Hmm.
this child that you have has challenges, yes, but they also have gifts.
Hmm.
And you have to allow those gifts to come out. And I think somehow I was not allowing that by the way that I was handling everything. And it just kind of breaks my heart right now.
Diane, all I can hear is courage and so much of honesty. I want to talk about two things. One is about the gifts you saw in Corinne. But before that, you're talking about self doubt, you're talking about angst, but I'm sure somewhere deep inside there was that quiet strength.
In terms of strengths for her, I noticed from an early age that she was a very talented artist. She was a little precocious in her art development, which I had studied in school, so I knew how that was supposed to progress. And so when other children are still scribbling, she was already making representational art. And so, sure enough, with some encouragement and just the opportunities to nurture that gift, she ended up with a fine arts degree in college. And I'm always amazed by her metaphorical art. So, for instance, when she was in college and she did her senior art show, and it was all about these different monsters. And they were all depictions of different parts that she felt from inside of her. And for instance, there was a bipolar dragon, and it had a spiky red, angry head and tail, and then a blue, smooth, sad, um, depressed kind of. Uh, so I just thought that was a huge gift to be able to show others, how she felt inside. I have this one part that feels this way sometimes, and this other part that feels that way. She's definitely honest, and she realizes that there's not a filter. And she's great to shop with, though, I have to say, because she'll either say, "Oh, Mom, that's so cute," or "Oh, no, take that dress off. You're not going in public in that." Um, but she is the most kind-hearted person, not a mean streak anywhere. And, that to me is even more important than any talent or gift or other kind of intelligence that she has, which also I've learned that she has incredible intelligence now in terms of all these computer skills and things. It's all beyond me. She basically does well by teaching herself things.
Mm.
And so she will pick things up and learn very, very quickly. So anyway, she has her own constellation of strengths. Fortitude, I might add, is another one. Can you imagine if you did have that onslaught of the busy airport 24/7 in your whole life, and then every day you just got up and out there into the airport again? That is amazing to me. I don't have that persistence and that strength of character that she has. But I have learned through the years to appreciate that, yes, I must have some strengths because I've had to deal with a lot of things that people go, wow, how strong or how patient or whatever you are. And you think, no, well, I just do what I have to do. Like when your daughter is born prematurely and spends 3 weeks in the hospital and you're, pumping breast milk and then bringing it during visiting hours and then going back home and then, whatever else. And so there were all these different challenges, not only with parenting and the pain of new medications, and they're all trial and error in terms of dosage. And you just keep going because, you want the best for your child. And recently I've had a more of a personal setback, a battle with breast cancer, which I'm so, so pleased to be on the other side of finally. Again, people say, wow, and how did you get through all that? And I think the biggest part of being able to be strong and to get through everything, for me, it's been my faith, it's been my family, especially my husband. You're loved when your husband sticks by you through thick or thin, through 30 something years. But then when you go through an experience like breast cancer and the surgeries and the recoveries and just the lack of energy, and he has to take over so much, and then you really feel loved. So I've had, good friends, other support networks that have helped me through the years. I definitely feel like I couldn't have done anything alone.
Awesome. Diane, fast forward to today. You and Corinne now do conferences together, do workshops together, offering both a parent and in, if I may use the word child's perspective.
Yes.
So talk to us about this collaboration and then, I'd love to talk about the 4Cs framework. Yeah.
Okay, great. So when she was younger, I was an early childhood teacher, and I taught in a lot of different settings, from public school kindergarten to full-time childcare to part-time preschool to my favorite was the university laboratory preschool settings because they have all the resources and the extra adults and everything. And it was a model program, so we knew we were doing the best practices that we could for young children. And then eventually, when we moved to Houston, then I shifted gears a little bit and with someone's encouragement, started doing more teacher education, which I had just dabbled in before. So then I found a new passion for that because it used to be all about helping the children develop to their full potential, which of course I'm still very passionate about. But I also recognize that it's not just that you want to help teachers do a better job so that their children develop to their full potential, but these adults are, people with needs of their own, and they need to have the support to be able to do the best that they can do for themselves and their children. And then it carries over to their family and their lives as well. And as I said at the beginning, I was kind of resentful of, this poor child who's in so much pain and she takes a lot of energy and perhaps she's holding me back from my goals in my career. It turns out once you reach that acceptance level of that stage of grief, that no, she's the key. So instead of kicking and screaming about focusing on special needs, what I've been able to do is to collaborate and marry what I was most passionate about in terms of child development and early childhood education and all the lessons that I learned from raising Corinne. And she is actually a very articulate spokesperson to share with the teachers what it felt like to be that challenging kid. How it felt when kids would come up to her and go, "Hey, hey, hey," and they're tapping her on the arm, but to her, it feels like a knife stabbing her. And so she has brought teachers to tears by explaining to them how, though well-intentioned, when they either, pulled her away from a situation physically, so added some painful touch to the situation, or used a loud voice, or called her out in front of her peers, or whatever, all reasonable things that, teachers may do, how that felt to her at the time, and then through the years, what she has learned about what works instead. And the amazing thing is that while we were kind of figuring these things out together, and I'm drawing from other experts in many different fields, from the psychiatrist and psychologist I had depended on to help me parent Corinne, as well as the early childhood educators, I had been putting together this framework of emotional support. And Corinne, it turns out, was illustrating exactly the points that the experts were saying that became part of my framework. So we really became a very strong team to share with people this is something that will help you support not only challenging children, but it will help you support all children's needs. And so that has really brought me a lot of joy because I didn't picture that happening, that I was going to be partnering with my own daughter in my own field to do things. And it's been a delight.
Beautiful. My God, I'm getting goosebumps, Diane. What I really want to unpack is, before I go to my next question, what inspired her to feel comfortable to talk about what she went through? Because at some level, it's also putting herself out there. It's also her accepting that she's different, right?
That's a good question. And I realized that there were two main sort of outside influences that helped tremendously. So when Corinne went to college and got her art degree, and we weren't really sure what employment opportunities might be appropriate and everything, we said, well, you have an art degree and you have a special comfort toy that she calls an eepworm. And I said, I bet preschool kids would like to know about it. What if you wrote and illustrated a children's picture book? And I've got kids' books and adults' books in my head, but I'm in my 60s and I still haven't gotten them out on paper. And Corinne just did that, like just boom. She wrote a little children's picture book with some beautiful watercolor painting illustrations on it. And this is about that time that I finally, sort of changed my outlook. And one of the good things that happened was there is an individual in our field, an expert in social emotional learning. I asked her for some feedback with the very first edition of the book, and she was so impressed that she said, if you change this one word, I'll carry it on my website, which is an internationally known program. And Corinne had a little note from the author, but basically it said that I had these toys and they were special to me. And so, here's why I wrote the book. But she said she thought it would be more powerful if Corinne would sort of come out as a person with these different disabilities, or we prefer brain disorders that she was struggling with. And so that was the first thing, because I think Corinne, with her history of not feeling accepted by her peers and even by adults her whole life, thinking something must be wrong with me, that was a hard thing to do. So she was trying to kind of just ignore the whole idea that I have anything different going on. And then there was somebody else we knew that was working at a school for children with neurological differences. And the kids that were graduating from the program had this employability conference, and they would invite speakers to this conference to tell them about, opportunities that might await them when they have finished school. And they invited Corinne, because of the book that she had written, to be their keynote speaker. And she did amazing. And that gave her the confidence to keep going forward. So then that gave me the idea, oh, well, what if we do this thing together? And so it just kind of morphed into that.
You also shared that her story has impacted a lot of educators.
Um, there's actually one, I tell the story more than she does, but it's her story absolutely. And that is that experts are telling us, in terms of children's emotional needs, that when they're acting out, they're actually crying out for love. And Corinne demonstrated that to me one day. It was very powerful because she was, I don't know, college age or something. And I was getting triggered. She was dysregulated. I was getting dysregulated right along with her. And so, mama, 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 mama. And we're just back and forth, kind of yelling at each other. And suddenly she stops and throws her hands out and says, love me, love me. And I was like, okay, I get it. Because I wasn't sure that I believed that.
Mm.
But here she was actually articulating what the experts are saying that young children are feeling. And so that's just kind of an example that I pull in, but she has some powerful examples too that really sort of get teachers in the gut, where they go, wow, I need to give this child what they need in this moment, which is actually to know that we care about them all the time and that we're there to help them through this moment, not punish them for it.
Let's talk more about those four key elements then.
So, this framework was based on the experts that guided my parenting journey, and as well as my own experiences in the classroom with children. And what I figured out eventually, and this is all from relatively recent brain research that has happened since the 90s. And we used to have kind of a different way of looking at children's behavior. And we used to think that we needed to make them feel bad if they're behaving badly. And now what we're realizing is that if a child is acting out, they're probably not making a conscious choice to do something, mean or destructive or something like that. They are probably reacting to their brain and body's messages that they are getting in response to stress. And so I call it the three C's of co-regulation. When kids are upset, first and foremost, they need to feel loved in that moment. And so the first C is connection. So we strengthen our relationship with them. We let them know that we love them no matter what. Or if love is a strong word for teachers, then that you care about them and you want the best for them all the time, and that they're bigger than that moment. The second C is that children, especially younger ones, need help calming down. So calming is the second C. Instead of telling children, like we used to, go sit in timeout until you can play nicely, that is separating the child. So it's actually hitting both of those two C's at once, saying, I only want to be with you when you're doing what I want you to do. So go over there. And the second thing is it's expecting the child to have the capacity to calm themselves down. And they are learning to do those things. But in preschool, if you think about it, they're not very far along on the road. And so we absolutely need to what's called co-regulate with them. We give them our calm so that to help them calm down. And then the third C that children need when they're upset is to be treated with compassion. And compassion is empathy with a desire to help. And as you know, empathy is that you understand how someone is feeling. So you're letting them know that, you seem angry or, you seem sad or frustrated, and I'm here to help you. Let's do this together. And so these three things all kind of go together. They're very interrelated. So it's not a first this, then this, then this. It's kind of, I'm going to give these three C's of co-regulation because this child is having a difficult moment. And then when they're calm, that's when we do all those other good parenting or teaching strategies that we use to let them know, here's what you do instead. Here's what I do when I get upset. Let's make this adjustment so it's not so hard for you to stop and clean up or come to the dinner table or brush your teeth for bed or whatever it is. And so the fourth C is actually an umbrella that I call capacity building. We're building children's capacity for self-regulation and other social emotional skills so that eventually they get even stronger. So that's kind of my framework, these four C's. And by the way, it works when adults are upset and teenagers and grandmas and everybody else.
Definitely. That's been so wonderful, Diane. But before we end this conversation, I'd love to talk about your biggest cheerleader, your husband, and then the journey which you're most passionate about now.
Yes, so, my husband is an amazing guy, but he's mine, so nobody else gets him. But anyway, he is incredibly committed to us as a couple, and he's also amazingly generous. I'm frugal to a fault, and he is generous almost to a fault. And I admire that so much in him. And because of the earning power that having the same level of education, but being in the field of engineering and consulting and environmental work is, been more lucrative than my own field of early childhood education. He has inspired me and enabled me with the financial resources to figure out that not only can I make an impact in my field while I'm here, but I can also leave a lasting legacy that will continue to keep giving after I'm gone. And so it was with his inspiration and his material resources that I was able to start on a journey of philanthropy in the last several years. And there's a saying that what you give, you receive. And what I discovered is that is really, really true. We did leave a legacy gift, but we also decided to share an immediate gift because we didn't want people to have to wait 20 or hopefully 30 or whatever years until we were gone to benefit from gifts that we might be able to give. And it took me a while to kind of get used to that idea. But once I embraced it, I think it's kind of like the acceptance in terms of helping Corinne through her struggles is it brings so many good things, not only to the people that you're sharing your gifts with, but back to you as well. So I'm supporting my alma mater of LSU, Louisiana State University, and he is supporting his alma maters. And that has inspired other people to give. And I was especially gratified that I just met another woman who was inspired to give a gift, who had, I think, originally been thinking about supporting early childhood education. But we decided after just meeting each other for an hour that we were going to partner together and give a joint gift to support a preschool laboratory at LSU. And so I'm on a mission to support early childhood educators because their work is so incredibly important. And unfortunately, pay levels are very low, status is low, and the field in general I don't think is going to be able to survive and do what it provides best for children unless we have buy-in and support from other fields and other interested folks who are in a position to support and uplift these educators. And so I just have to throw out an ask in there in this to all of your listeners, Emma, to just consider thinking about how foundational early childhood is a period of life. Look it up. There's lots of evidence there for how those first 5 years in particular are incredibly important for young children. And when we set a good foundation, then not only is it good for those children themselves, but for their whole families now, their future families, all of our communities. So when we lift early childhood educators and that field, we are lifting up our entire community and it will benefit us all.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I think we all have to inspire and motivate each other. So, on this note, just want to say a big thank you to you, Diane, and looking forward to meeting you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, do hang on for just one more minute. I have a request for you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Atlanta Diaries on Spotify, iTunes, or whichever platform you follow. Do join us in our mission to empower and inspire by sharing the podcast with a friend or colleague. It will be great if you can share on the social media platforms you follow, be it LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or any other. Please leave a review or rating on iTunes or Spotify. It really helps us reach a wider audience. Lastly, I wanted to share with you that many of my coaching clients and listeners have created a cheat sheet with their key takeaways from the episodes. I invite you to consider jotting down 1 or 2 key takeaways as you navigate your amazing journey. Have a wonderful rest of the day and see you next week for another inspiring journey on Atlanta Diaries.